Welcome to Expressions of Leadership, a podcast showcasing the many faces of leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. From teachers to artists to C-suite leaders, we explore how people own their authentic leadership, celebrate their triumphs, overcome challenges, and share lessons learned. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Rob Grad. Rob is a multidisciplinary artist whose journey began in music. Signed to RCA Records after high school, his music was featured on MTV and multiple TV shows before a life-changing trip in 2008 led him to visual art. His bold 3D mixed media pieces explore themes of desire, fulfillment, and resilience, and have been commissioned for major projects including the LA Clippers Intuit Dome. He's exhibited internationally, including at Art Basel, and he was featured in a museum show for the Getty's Pacific Standard Time Initiative, where he combined his art with a live performance. His TEDx talk, Finally Using My Own Eyes, explores authenticity and the evolving adventure of life as a creative. Recently, his work has come full circle as he integrates his poetry and music into his visual art. Welcome to the Expressions of Leadership show, Rob. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you. Really good to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Now, you have such a diverse creative background, music, visual arts, writing. Take us back to the beginning. What first sparked your creative journey?
My mom was a writer and my father was a concert pianist. So creativity was just kind of in our house growing up. And I'd gotten into a band early teens, but when it really became my journey, when it really turned is when I started writing songs. Um, that's when it turned for me. Because when I was growing up, I really felt invisible a lot. My parents were fighting a lot at home. It was a difficult childhood, and somehow putting the things that I was thinking and feeling into a song, making a statement, something that physically existed in the world, was appealing to me. Sort of a way to voice my interpretation of the world, my philosophy, and sort of how I was feeling.
And being signed to RCA Records and appearing on MTV so soon after high school is huge. What was that experience like for you at such a young age?
Wonderful and confusing. it was, to sit in a living room and hear, to hear a song on the radio while I'm driving or something that I wrote in the living room was a thrill. I mean, it was exciting as hell. And to pull into a town when we were on the road and, have people feel like they knew me. And, I loved meeting people and I loved performing. It was just cathartic, and that connection with the audience was something that I loved and craved to get that immediate feedback. But I was also very uncomfortable not being the singer, having my thoughts and my feelings and statements about the world being filtered through someone else somehow just never really resonated with me. So while we had a certain amount of popularity at the time, we also never really broke through. So my real goal to have that size of an impact in the world that I really wanted to have was never accomplished. So even though we did so much, at the end, I'm proud of what we did, but it was also very disappointing.
Hmm. And how did that then shape your perspective on creativity and identity?
Well, first, I think it really confirmed to me how powerful and what a powerful force creativity can be. The healing it can create for people, making us, this is how I felt growing up when I listened to my heroes, and then to somehow become part of that conversation and to give that back somehow and sort of feel like I'm in that loop. And, what was healing to me, I was able to forward. And so, music was there for me and art when things were difficult at home and when I was really struggling growing up. And so, I do think that I came away from that experience somewhat heartbroken, but also sort of empowered. So it was kind of this weird sort of dichotomy that I kind of experienced, and it did, as far as shaping me, I started asking questions like, well, was it me? Am I not good enough? So, at the end, I wound up kind of reinforcing some negative ideas that I got at home growing up. And it was only later, I think, that I could see it more clearly as a positive. It took time.
Now, you were part of the MTV generation, a group that essentially invented itself as it went along. How has that ethos influenced your evolution as an artist and leader in your field?
Um, I can't overstate the influence that it's had. MTV at the time, if you're not old enough and weren't there to experience it at the time, it was a global phenomenon. Like it was everyone everywhere was watching the same thing. Whether you liked it or not was irrelevant. It was we were all had the same reference points. It's not like today where we're all kind of siphoned off into our niches and our, because we didn't have so many options, right? And MTV just kind of came in and took over the world. So, and there was extreme power in that, which I think was also the allure for a lot of people to get into that industry. Um, but there was also no script for something like that, like that sort of, and the attitude, that we make it up as we go along. That's kind of what it was, and that's how I grew up and that's how the band was. And that was kind of, it goes through everything that I still do. You can always reinvent yourself. And I think that, it's that idea that I carried forward later when I decided to focus on visual art, right? I was like, time to move on. So, you have to take risks to stand out. And I think sometimes in order to really, I mean, this is a leadership uh, show here. And I think that you need to be able to find ways to step out of the pack and just go your own way and trust that. Trust is a huge piece of the puzzle.
Hmm.
It's like I call it the still quiet voice inside that we have, and we all have it. And whether we're a creative or not, air quotes, like it's sort of um we just have to, that is the thread of authenticity and originality that all of us have. And it's a process of clearing the other things away and then trusting and listening to that, even if it doesn't make sense at the time, which is really when you find yourself out in the wilderness by yourself.
Hmm. Sometimes that's the best way to be, though. Sometimes you need to be on your own to actually figure out what's going to be best for you and what's the right next step.
I think that's part of the back to the MTV generation thing. Everyone at the time was really looking to be an individual, and it wasn't so much groupthink.
And then in 2008, you had this life changing trip, which led to this transition from music into visual arts and writing and mixed media. Can you tell us more about that experience?
I can tell you a lot about it. I'm deciding how much to tell you about it. So, because we could do a whole show just on this. It was totally pivotal. So, I, okay, so I'm a person of following the intuition, and this is this part of the story I wasn't planning on telling, but I'm going to tell it. Um, so I was making music. I was working on a solo album. My second band had done moderately well. We had another deal and we were on a big TV show and did some things and but that kind of petered out as well. And I decided to do a solo album and I was working on the solo album. And I was getting frustrated with music. I was getting frustrated with where my life was. And I started getting horrific chest pains, like scary. And there was one night where I was walking down by the water. I lived in Marina Del Rey in Los Angeles at the time. And I was coming back upstairs and I wasn't sure I was going to make it up the stairs. I thought they were going to have to call 911. And so I sat there for a second and I thought, well, if I can't make it, if I can make it up the stairs, I had an appointment with this woman that I was kind of, I don't know what you'd call her, life coachy medium person at the time. And I said, I had an appointment with her the next morning. And I said, if I can make it up the stairs, I'll go see her in the morning and then I'll decide what to do after. I made it up the stairs. I went to see her in the morning. I went in to see her and I had told her that I was going to go take a trip. And I hadn't taken the trip yet because, things happen, right? Like everything was happening. And so, anyway, she said, you have to go on the trip. This is your body speaking to you that you need to go. It's saying you have to leave. You have to, get out of here. Go do the trip. And I was going to go to France. So I said, okay, I'll book the trip. So she goes, trust me, you'll start feeling better. I said, okay. And so I did. I planned that trip. And by the time I got to France, the chest pains were almost gone. She was right. And on that trip, I went alone. I had never been to Europe before, so that was sort of this sojourn kind of experience. And I started in London, and when I went to Paris, I spoke about this in my TEDx talk that I did, but I got to San Michel station and I walked up because it was near my hotel, and I walked upstairs and I just took one look at the street, my first experience of Paris, and I just felt comfortable in a way that I've never felt anywhere else into my life. And it was freakish because I'd never been there. And so the trip kind of went from there. At the end of the trip, I wound up in Madrid, and I wound up standing in front of a painting called The Express by Robert Rauschenberg. And while I was standing in front of that painting, I was looking at it. He was using silk screens with photographic emulsion. So basically, kind of like Andy Warhol was doing with the photographs, and then he makes a silk screen out of it, and then they cover it with paint. And I was looking at it, and I thought, that's not all different than what I was doing. I had been printing on these transparencies for my CD covers to send to music supervisors. And I thought, that emulsion process isn't all that different than what I'm kind of doing using the transfers, and then it was a clear, and then putting it over a piece of sandpaper or layering it on something. So I thought, huh. And I always loved art. I always wanted to be an artist. I always figured my next life, maybe I'll be an artist. I chose music. It's not my fate. And I went home. I made two paintings. I painted on a canvas some abstract thing, and I put these photographs over it, printed on plexiglass, and brought them to a friend of mine who owned a little gallery space in West LA, and I got my first show. And a whole new door opened for me. So that trip was the impetus of an entire new career starting, and it was magical.
A true personal reinvention. How do you stay open to reinvention?
I think, and I think even more so today than perhaps even 20 years ago, the way that life is moving so fast now and careers move so fast, like so few people have careers now, just the old days where you get a job at, after college and you just work there until you get retirement or whatever. Like I do believe that we all live multiple lives now. I actually have a poem I wrote called Five Lives in One, and it's kind of like I've lived five lives in one, each one better than the last, hopefully, kind of thing. But so
Mhm.
this idea of I think reinvention is part of survival. I think that being open to it is really about I think that our subconscious which has more knowledge than we do, I believe, speaks to us through our own frustrations and discomfort. And I think that sometimes discomfort is the key. So we spend so much time and energy trying to avoid our discomfort when really discomfort is a tool. I see discomfort as a tool, and it's a message. It's a beacon. It's a like, hey, you know, pay attention.
Mhm.
Just like when you hurt your arm, you get pain because the pain tells you, hey, pay attention over here. That clean it out, do whatever you have to do, and then let it heal up. And I think that in a lot of ways, our society has bred this idea into us that somehow it's not good to feel bad. And
Mhm.
of course, you don't want to, I'm not talking about depression and, all these things, there is such a thing. But if you're talking about being in your career or a relationship or like a path in life and something is just bugging the crap out of you, I think that that is a message that says, hey, take a look at this here. So I was really frustrated with music at the time. I felt like I knew what I was doing was good, and I just couldn't get anyone to pay attention. And I felt like the music business was just in the crapper, and it wasn't interesting to me anymore. The classic song structure, even verse, chorus, bridge, like I was just like, I was done. Like I was just totally done with it. And yet I was too afraid to do anything. So
Mm.
as far as being able to the idea came when I finally, through chest pain, physical pain, allowed myself to take that trip and be open. And that's when the ideas came.
Mm.
Another example of that is Apple with the iPod. Sometimes you have to eat your young, you know? So if Apple had held on to the iPad, or the iPod, we'd never have a phone, right? So they completely ate their own sales of iPod, which was selling a lot at the time, in order to release the iPhone. So, you know, you have to have faith in the beacon at the end of the horizon and just follow that.
Faith in the beacon. Love that. Well, this conversation with Rob Grad is just getting started, but we're going to take a quick break. So stick around, where we'll be diving into Rob's thoughts on leadership, creativity, and pushing boundaries right after this. Love what you're hearing? Hit that follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And be sure to connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to the Expressions of Leadership show. We're here with artist and musician Rob Grad, diving into the evolution of his creative journey. Your work addresses big existential themes: desire, fulfillment, resilience. What compels you to explore these topics in your art, and how do they connect to leadership in today's world?
I think fulfillment in life is as elusive as it's ever been. It's such a big question. It's not about, ultimately what we want is fulfillment to me. We can want success, we can want all these things on the road, but all those things that we want are in order to feel fulfilled in some way, right? So to me, I'm always looking for the baseline. What connects us? I think the advent of technology is largely underdelivered in the fulfillment department. It was supposed to make life better and easier, and yet we're busier than ever. We got more things clawing at us from all sides. Kids are depressed. We've got more to do. Our brains are all yacked out on dopamine. Like, I'm not sure, as much as it allows us to have this conversation today, which is great. So there's the positives too, right?
Mhm.
But everything in life is a mixed bag. And with it has come all this other stuff as well. Am I any happier today than I was before the internet? For those of us who remember before then, no, because I think that comes from within us, whatever's going on in the world. So I like to focus on ideas that inspire me, that give me hope in our noisy world. I got hooked on drugs for a bit when I was a teenager as part of the difficult upbringing. And coming out of that had me asking those existential questions at a very young age. Why bother? What are we doing here? Because, I was looking for reasons not to kill myself, basically. So, coming from that place, it got me thinking about, how could my life look better? I'm always looking for a light, a crack in the veneer of our so-called reality, right? Anytime we're working against inertia, to me, that requires leadership, right? Because it's easy just to kind of go with the current. And, it requires a willingness to kind of walk alone, to find something worthwhile, and then signal back like, hey, everything's good over here, So to me, that's sort of how that, your leadership question kind of ties into that. But I I'm looking for things in the art that I want to express things in the art that helped me experiencing other people's art when I was going through difficult times.
Now, you push yourself into new and uncomfortable creative spaces. Can you share a moment when stepping into that discomfort has led to a major breakthrough in your work or leadership approach?
I said before that I do believe that so much of this is tied into trust and faith in that sort of intuitive pull. And the older I get and the more I've done it, the better I am at it. Coming back to the MTV generation thing, when I was growing up, we didn't want to be part of the pack, right? We wanted to be different. Today, I see a lot of people that want to be part of a group. It's groupthink, and while working together is good, I mean, we are social beings. It's all good. This sort of sense of being alone in the wilderness isn't as common, and I think it's made it even more exciting when we come across that. Because that's what leadership is to me: being one step being the one to step out, one step ahead, looking out, extending a hand, going like, hey, over here is good, and everybody comes together, like to do something different, to lay track that's worthwhile. It's exciting or enlightening in some ways. So as a specific example, I did a museum residency last year. And it was greatest residency ever. They basically just said, they sent me out into a wildlife preserve out in the desert, and they said, we just want you to come out here and hang out and be an artist. We don't care if you make work. We don't care what you do. I was like, great, I can do that. And so it was the hardest thing in the world to not just make art as soon as I got there, because my head goes so into these places of like, what can I do with this? It's so beautiful. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do, and I was like, no, just be here. Shut up. Just be here. And so I did that a few times. I went out there. And then on this one day that I went out there, I went to visit my grandmother on the way out. And my grandmother was very sick and about to pass away at the time. And she had a drawing pad at her house. And she gave it to me. She's like, I don't need it. I'm dying. She had a sense of humor about it. My grandma died at 97.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was, by 93, she's like, all my friends are dead. God forgot about me. So she was pretty ready to go. She had a really about as good an attitude about death as you can have. So anyway, she gave me this pad and I'm driving out there. And so I drive out and I pull into the parking lot. And now you have to understand my artwork that I make is a lot based on photography and painting wild shapes. I do not draw. And I don't profess to know how to draw. I'm just not that guy. Could I draw, this computer if I sat here long enough? Yes, I could. Would it be any good? Be all right. You know what I mean? So it's just not what I do. So I bring this pad out with me, and but I'm getting out of the car, and something inside me says, "Bring the pad." I like hearing a voice. I was like, okay. And I like I should bring something to write with. I literally had no pen in the car and have a pen in my backpack. I had an orange crayon that my daughter had left in my car. So I grabbed the orange crayon and this tablet and I just go for a walk, out in the desert area there. And I'm standing in front of a Joshua tree at one point, and something inside I was like, I'm gonna try and do, just I should draw something. So I sat in front of the tree, I opened a page, I took out my orange crayon, and I just did this very sort of intuitive, kind of flowy drawing that I felt without. It's like an exercise you do in drawing schools. I forget what they call it. I didn't go to drawing school, so I don't know. But where you automatic drawing, like you don't look at the paper, right? You just look at what you're drawing and you just kind of go. And so I did that. And I felt, like how did the branches move? How did just kind of feeling sort of what the movement was in the tree. And I looked down, I was like, oh, that's cool, whatever. So I walked a little more, I did another one. I walked a little bit more, I did another one. And the third one I did when I looked down after, because I wasn't looking at the drawings while I was doing it. When I looked down after, um, it was great. Like I loved it. There was something about it that was really interesting. So, so at this point, I have all these voices in my head. I don't draw. This isn't art. It's a dumb squiggle. Everyone's going to hate it. You know what I mean? Like I immediately start going there. And I was like, this doesn't have to be anything. Just let it go, And so I just did. But I kept doing them for a little bit. Well, fast forward 6 months later, I'm doing a ton of these drawings because they're super fun and I love them and they're really freeing. And I get asked to be in a museum show for Pacific Standard Time for the Getty at this museum. And they want to do something with the drawings that I did out in the uh, residency. I'm like, oh, okay. So I came up with this idea because it was about the piece was called "The Future is Not a Given," and this idea that we can influence our future. It's not something we're not just driving on a doomsday course with inertia, that we can intervene. This is a collaborative effort with the universe, that these lives that we're living in. And so I took 40 of these drawings that I did, and I did them on handmade paper that was kind of semi-transparent. And I stitched them together with medical sutures. And the curators and I brought this piece to the show, and it got approved. And the curators later told me it was one of their favorite pieces in the show. And it was something I had totally never done before. And now those drawings, I've been turning them into large scale sculptures. And that's what I'm doing right now. So this little thing that came from drawing with an orange crayon in the car, just because I had a feeling, is now becoming an entirely new avenue of my work.
And from just being,
Hmm.
rather
Yes.
than I'm trying to create
Yes.
something,
That's a good point.
you were just being in that moment. And again, you're like, this is not something I normally do. I don't normally draw. And I had an orange crayon of all things to draw with. And those types of seeming limitations actually opened up a whole new avenue for you.
Yeah. I think sometimes we don't, if someone had sat in the car with me and go, "Oh, these drawings are going to be a whole new thing for you," I've been like, "What?" I think that I think the wisdom that lives inside and around us sometimes just gives us the next step. You know, we'd be overwhelmed. We wouldn't trust it. We wouldn't believe if how things might turn out. So I think sometimes it really is, just like I said, trusting that, cultivating the ability to communicate and hear it, and then trusting it, which
Mhm.
is it's a process, because sometimes we think we might know something and we don't, like all these other things that kind of can confuse that picture. But as I'm getting older and doing it longer, I'm able to navigate that better.
Mhm. And so it sounds like a lot of the way that you approach leadership is intuitive.
Very much so. Leadership is an intuitive experience for me because my definition of myself, I do not believe is entirely accurate. So I'm actually going to do a series of work coming up called I Was Wrong About Me. And I think that I had this realization. My sister sent me a bunch of old pictures of us growing up. And I mentioned before that it was a very hard time for me, and it was a hard time at home. And I'm looking at these pictures of me as a kid. I'm 8, I'm 10, I'm 12, and I got a smile on my face, and I was just a normal kid. And in my mind, the reality was so different than what it really was on the outside that I don't really always trust my own perception of things at the time. So I do believe in order to truly be a leader for me and my role in my life as a leader is I have to have that intuitive trust, because if I just listen to the voice in my head tell me that I can't do things and, whatever, then I won't be a leader, right? And I won't, and more importantly, I won't live the life that I really want to live.
Mhm.
And I think that in order for us to have the most truest, freest, most real experience of ourselves in our lives, that we all have to be that leader in our own life.
Well, we've covered Rob's incredible journey from music to visual art, but after break, we're going to explore how he approaches risk taking, innovation, and resilience in his work. Stay with us. Are you looking to connect with an audience passionate about leadership, growth, and success? Become a sponsor of Expressions of Leadership and align your brand with inspiring conversations that make an impact. Contact us at let's talk at expressionsofleadership.com to explore sponsorship opportunities. You're listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. Let's get back to our conversation with Rob Grad. Why do you think authenticity is so important for leaders, not just artists, to embrace?
I think it's the only source of true wisdom in the world. Like, to me, it's the way out of the situations, the world situation that we're in, as chaotic as it gets. I mean, this true source of authenticity is is like the most real thing we can experience, in my opinion. And like these words get thrown around, so it's like, as much of a proponent of it as I am, I'm a little annoyed with myself using that word, because I feel that it's deeper than that, than what the word really alludes to. And B, so I was doing graphic design for this corporation, and before I went to art full time. And they used these words like authenticity and passion and, all these things. And they threw these things around like these buzzwords. They used them as like buzzwords because they were just trying to hawk product. So our posts have to be more authentic so that people will connect. Like it's a marketing ploy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And I I was gonna. There were multiple meetings I thought I was gonna throw up. Like it was just horrific, and for me, and maybe it's just the MTV generation artist guy in me. Whatever. Like I get it, and I get that this thing, but it was the most inauthentic expression of quote authenticity I'd ever experienced, and um, it drove me nuts. And even with social media and everything that we have these days, like you know, is it people always want, oh, like every marketing course or anything you do on the social media, they're always like, oh, it's got to be authentic and all these things. And they throw these words around and it drives me nuts because most of what you see on there is totally not authentic, right? In respect to the way that we're discussing it here. And so I've been experimenting with this recently, and so I've been doing different types of posts purposely. Maybe it's a performance art thing or something, but I've been sort of experimenting with these different things and different types of posts just to see kind of how does this go over? What do people think? And the posts of mine most recently that have gotten the most response, the most new followers, like all the buzz stuff that everybody wants to get, right? Have been the ones where I'm doing something totally mindless in my studio, like painting frames, right? And I just have turned on the camera and I just start talking like you and I are now, literally with no, I'm not trying to, to me, they're boring and potentially rambling, although I try to edit them together so it's not completely, at least have some respect for the viewer, but, but, those are the posts everybody likes. And that's because I think that's what we want in life. We just want to feel like we're hanging out with a friend and connect with someone where we have like values and maybe we see the world in partially similar fashions, but maybe not perfectly so that we have something to offer each other. You know what I mean? Like, and to me, that is authenticity.
Now, leadership isn't always about leading people, it's also about leading ideas.
Yeah.
So, how do you see your role as a leader in the creative space?
I believe there is a creative force in the universe that's trying to figure stuff out. I have a poem I wrote for this multimedia show that I did, performance show. And the poem is called The Point of It All. And it's a 6 minute hypothetical exploration from the perspective that if you were the creator of the universe, or if I was the creator of the universe, the ultimate perfect whatever, before we had anything, what would you have done? How would you go about it? So I kind of walk through some parameters of what that might have been like. And it walks you through this entirely logical, plausible scenario that winds up basically where we are right now in the world and the universe that we have exactly as we have. And the point of the poem isn't to say like, oh, I figured this out. The point of it is to say there is a logical train of thought that gets us here from that. And so to me, that's reassuring that my version of it probably isn't right, right? But one day we will figure it out. Someone will figure these things out, or we'll figure them out ourselves, whatever it is. So I try not to over or underestimate myself. I think to have a perspective, I try to have a perspective that's beyond good or evil, positive or negative. Um, I see my role from the perspective of leadership is to try and steer whatever influence I might find to greater awareness, a greater awareness that breaks us free of the things that hold us back, the toxic news cycle, the atrocities of the world, the big questions, and get back to just where we are. I don't really necessarily believe in good and bad or evil or whatever. Evil to me is the absence of good. So my responsibility as an artist, and I think like you just said, leaders aren't necessarily leading people like a team, right?
Hmm.
I don't have a team of people and I'm like the leader of. I see my role as a leader in the world is to cultivate these ideas and my experience and my adventure in my experience to hopefully connect with other people who are doing the same. And we offer each other something that can help lift, rising water lifts all boats.
Mm. Challenge and resilience are major themes in your work. Can you share a pivotal moment, whether personal or professional, where a setback or obstacle ultimately shaped your path for the better?
I think our natural state is resilient. I think it's woven into who we are. Look at nature all around. It always finds a way, and I think we will too. Even if most of us get wiped out one day, due to a war or a disease or something, whoever's left, they're going to figure it out, and if they don't, new life will appear. Challenges seem smaller to me in that perspective, and to acknowledge that there's always a solution to something. In fact, I think someone else on your show has said the same thing, and I follow the same thing, is that there's always a solution to something. We live in a duality universe, right? So for every positive, there is a negative. It cannot be any other way. But which also means, though, the good news is for every problem, there is a solution. It exists somewhere. And when someone finally explained it to me that way, I thought, oh, and it really helped me to take a new attitude when challenges presented themselves. So now when I'm hit with things that um, are challenging, I go, okay, so there is literally a physical solution to this. I just have to be open to it, continue thinking about it.
Hmm.
So here's the thing. I shared earlier about hitting a point in my life where music got boring and frustrating, and that frustration and failure to accomplish my dream in music led me to sort of explore something new, right? That ultimately changed my life. The wisdom part of it was only in hindsight, right? I didn't realize that at the time. If my first band hadn't failed, the one that was signed, to the big record deal and MTV and all that stuff, I never would have been happy as the bass player in that band. So if that band had been really successful, I wouldn't have been happy, because I was never comfortable having someone else sing my songs. And I kind of knew it at the time, but I really wanted to be successful, so I just kind of rolled with it. So if my solo album had gone huge or something when I put that out, right when I was changing into art, I may never have found a career in art, right? So which I love, and so I love my musicians friends, but when I started meeting artists, I thought, oh my God, these are my people, and now I go freely between the two groups. So I look back now, I see those failures as necessary for me to connect to uh, more deeply with that authentic streak inside of me that's pulling me to my biggest, best life, which is what I believe.
And taking risks is essential in both creativity and leadership. And you've taken a lot of risks. How do you navigate that uncertainty while staying resilient in your artistic and professional journey?
It's funny when I hear you say it. I go, well, I guess you're right. From my perspective, like I don't feel like that risky of a person. And it's interesting, that like that's when you look from the outside, I guess I am, right? But in my mind, it's my natural way of being, right? I mean, humans like safety. It's biologically encoded. It's survival, right? So there's a rub there, right? Because we're trying to, the problem is that our biological mind is telling us like thinks that if we're uncomfortable, we're going to die, right? So if you leave the tribe, you're going to die. And there was a time when that was true, you know, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever, whatever it was, like that's actually probably true. So we do have some of that encoding, but the problems that we're dealing with these days aren't those. So it takes a minute to kind of to, it's okay to leave the tribe. We can survive, So I still think faith and trust are ultimately the answer. Um, if I'm convinced that my success and my safety come from walking into the wilderness, guided by the quiet, small voice, then it doesn't feel so risky, right? To me, it's more risky to not push myself into new places because how am I ever going to be successful? How am I ever going to get to the places that I want to go if I don't do that? So I think it's just how we view what quote risk is. To me, it's more risky not to take those leaps than it is to sit back.
Hmm.
Um, and I do have those moments these days. I recognize it when it happens, right? Where I have an idea and I have this pause and I kind of go like, and I literally feel like I'm walking past an electric fence, I'm just going to kind of step over that here, because I've learned just acknowledge that and go. This is an exciting moment, not to be feared, right? This is like when I was doing the drawings, like just take the step, just do it, trust it. It's okay.
And if it doesn't work out, what do you go to help you get back on track?
I'll keep coming back. So if I try something that doesn't work, sometimes that leads me to something else. First of all, right? So I tried this thing, but I didn't like it. But then while I was doing that, I got this idea and it brought me somewhere else. So sometimes you're connecting the dots, climbing the ladder, and it's one failed experiment after the next, but you're kind of climbing up the ladder. That happens sometimes. And if I really try something that doesn't work out or whatever, I just come back to where I was before I took the step out and reassess, okay, what else can I try? What else? Is there anything else I can do? Sometimes I try to ask the question, like if I have a goal in mind or something that I want to accomplish, then I ask, what can I just do today that steps me in that direction? And then try and listen to the intuitive thought that says, do this, do that, kind of thing. Um, so those are the things that I would return to. It's just kind of, I don't necessarily think of things as off course, but I do think of there are dead ends, you know, and we're not perfect people. We're never going to listen to these impulses perfectly. And I do believe there's sort of a greater wisdom to it all. And so we just kind of have to collaborate with that.
Now, I want to turn to innovation and technology and how that influences your work. And we've seen it also influence future leadership. And you participated in a project for TikTok China, and you've experienced firsthand how technology has reshaped art and music and creative storytelling. How do
Okay.
you see artists and leaders navigating this rapidly changing landscape?
I think artists are actually in a good position with this stuff. Um, the TikTok thing was great. So it was the TikTok mini film festival, they called it. And a Chinese movie director had reached out to me and asked me to do this little project with her. And it was great. She, someone I've become very friendly with, and her and her husband own a fair bit of my artwork and stuff. So we ended up, we made an 8-foot painting out of ice cream with a bunch of 8-year-olds, and we synced it up to a song I'd written called Crazy to Give Up Now. And it was just a really fun, awesome project. And, so I think that technology provides new opportunities to tell stories, and artists tell stories. We're not all the great storytellers, but we do tell stories in our work. And so I do think artists are in a very good position, but I think we have to own that power, and it's very easy to kind of get feel overwhelmed, or hey, it's not the art, or it's not about the art. Like I was telling you before, these posts that I've been doing where I'm just like chatting while I'm painting frames, like it's not. I think we have to be able to constantly change our thinking around it, because it's a rapidly changing space, like you said, right? We get so much input from these sources that burnout is fast. So that means what people want changes on a dime, right? As soon as as soon as the algorithm is feeding you all sorts of the same kind of thing, after a while, you're like, okay, that's lame. Now what? Right? So I think that, like for me right now, I'm just tired of being sold things. It's being sold courses, being sold ideas, being sold people's lifestyle. Like I feel like everything on social media right now is selling me on something, even if it's just like how cool you are. I don't care, right? So it's just because I burned out on it, right? So like that, I think like we were talking about authenticity for the corporation, like just ugh. So I have this a t-shirt that I made that says I'm not a brand. It's a little statement that I made to myself, but then I put the registered trademark thing after it because it's futile, right? To totally do it. And at the same time, I kind of like making that statement, you know. So because social media kind of does require that if you want to speak through social media with any sort of uh, gravitas or whatever, certain branding techniques are useful, right? Because you're boiling down a complex being who we are to try and create a more easily understandable perspective and expression, which is what that is. So, but for me, like when did the corporatization of the individual become cool? Like I looked up to rock stars, not CEOs when I was growing up, you know. So I think artists are in a great position because we think fast on our feet, we come up with new ideas. I mean, even AI, you know, uh, is all about the prompt. Anyone who's experimented with AI, right? If you just put in a generic prompt, you're going to get crap out of there, right? Garbage in, garbage out. It's horrible. Like especially like from a visual standpoint, artists like, oh my God, it's atrocious. But if you really work on that prompt and you really figure out what you're trying to do and you work with it a little bit, you can get something kind of cool, right? So I use it all the time, not to create my visuals so much, but I use it for it's a tool. These things are all tools. I'm actually going to do a series of prints coming up that come out soon, actually, um, where with this idea of technology, putting it back in its perspective, its right place as a tool. These things are tools that we can use. How can this tool make what I do better, more effective, and increase my connection with people?
It sounds like what you're saying is that these tools can be used as a way to enhance your creative expression.
Yeah, when I see an invention like AI, my first thought's always like, what can I do with that? You know,
Mhm.
not like, oh my God, this is going to replace me. Like, uh, I actually did a post recently about, is AI bad for art? And my come out is no, I don't think it is. AI is going out into the world and using existing data. It is not coming up with new ideas, right? It is assimilating things into something that might seem new, and it can be really great. It can be super cool. It can look awesome, whatever. But as an artist, for me, and I think this plays into the leadership connection to me with being an artist. Not all artists think like I do, but this is how I look at it, is I'm looking for that new idea, something that hasn't been thought before. I'm looking for the ideas that AI is going to need later to try and help somebody else. That's what I'm trying to do. So, and can it be a tool to help me? Yes. AI has been great for me to sort of um, help me articulate my work better. Things like that. Awesome. Just great. The stuff you get back from it's nothing short of fantastic. So I am not worried about technology. I think if it's used properly, they can greatly enhance what we do. But I think that to be a true artist and a true leader is to try and find something that hasn't been put out in the world before, not assimilating a bunch of stuff that's already been out there.
Well, let's take a short break. And when we return, Rob will share his upcoming projects and how his creativity continues to evolve. Don't go anywhere. Great leadership starts with great culture. At the Forward Project, we help organizations transform their workplace culture and develop leaders who inspire, engage, and drive meaningful change. Ready to take your team to the next level? Visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn more. We're back on Expressions of Leadership with the extraordinary artist and musician Rob Grad. And before break, we touched on how his work keeps shifting and expanding. So, Rob, what's next on the horizon for you?
So the next roads for me, I want to work on more large scale experiential installations that sort of bring all of my worlds together. I think where I'm at right now is wanting to become full circle with the things that I do. So audio and visual. I did a show as part of the Pacific Standard Time in December, and it was my poems with my music performed, and then I had this giant projection behind me, this sort of huge thing that was all of also my work and helping to sort of round out the experience and everything. I want to do more of that. Um, I'm also focused on these sculptures that I'm doing that are made from the drawings that I've been working on. Some things that people can enjoy and experience anywhere. Um, I probably will get more heavy-handed with my perspective and philosophy in the work as well, because this is what drives the work. So I think that the next step for me would be to be more clear about that.
I'm curious when you say you want to bring more of your philosophy into your work. Do you know what that will look like?
First of all, the experiential shows and the music and stuff, it's pretty easy, especially now that I'm doing the kind of spoken word thing mixed with songs. It's very easy. It's a great avenue and medium to express more specific thoughts, right? Not quite as when you look at a visual of something, it's more intuitive sometimes. Um, but I do, even in the visual work, the strictly visual work, I'm going to try and incorporate a little bit more, even the abstract stuff. Like I'm doing this sculptures of trees right now, and I'm really kind of trying to get into flow and, these kinds of concepts where it's about, following the journey and being yielding and stuff. So it's really just about which things to focus on and try and incorporate those ideas as I get in there.
Rob, for anyone who wants to follow your work or see your latest projects or catch an upcoming event, what's the best place for them to connect to you?
I'm everywhere on social. I've got Instagram, I've got TikTok, so you do get stuff there. My website has a lot of my artwork, my bio, my TED Talk, videos, things like that. So I definitely recommend going there. I would also recommend, I do have an email list. I do not send newsletters. What I send out, or from time to time, I send out specific stories, thoughts, think very specific sharing that I do not share on social media the same way, if at all. And most of the people on that list have been there for years and tell me how much they look forward to receiving the emails. So that would be another thing to do. And that's just go to robgrad.com/VIP and just pop in your name, and I will just send these to you. It's a very cool group of people. I think of it more as a community than sort of like my email list. And that's how I treat it when the letters go out. So those are all good ways to find me.
We've now reached the segment of our show where we ask the guest an advice question and a fun question. For aspiring artists and leaders who want to carve their own path, what's one piece of advice you wish you had received earlier in your journey?
If things aren't looking how you want them to, don't just try harder. That was something I did. Think about what isn't working. Be willing to adjust, change. Don't hold on too tight to what you think you want. I mean, go for it, but also be open. Like, always have to continue working on yourself. People are attracted to people we feel are being real, and following that unique streak inside them. That's who I'm attracted to, right? I'm attracted to people who at least appear to sort of be having that experience in their own life, because that's inspiring to me. It tells me something about what lives inside of me. So I'd say follow it, express it, be that, excavate that. Something inside you already has the answer. I see my life these days as a collaboration with unseen forces, so you're going to feel alone sometimes, but that means you're in new territory. That's a good thing. That's where the creative leaders live. And so it can be a place where you feel misunderstood or maybe ahead of your time. Um, but just be fiercely yourself. Never assume you fully know who that is either, because you're also changing. In time we change too. So what was authentic for me 20 years ago isn't today.
And now for our fun question. If your life was captured in the expectation versus reality meme, what would the two pictures be?
The expectation, I think I would be laying in a lounge chair on a cloud with sunbeams gently caressing my face. And then my reality would be sitting on a curb in the gutter with my eyes closed, savoring a mouthful of spectacular ice cream.
That is so great. Absolutely hilarious. Thank you for sharing. Well, this has been such a delightful interview. I'm so happy that you joined us today on Expressions of Leadership. Thank you for being here, Rob.
Thank you for asking me this. All of your questions got me thinking about things in ways that I really haven't thought about them in those terms before. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. This has been awesome, and it's great to see you.
And thank you to our audience. We're so happy to have you join us, and we'll see you soon. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you soon. Take care.